Welcome in, everybody, and welcome to the Marshall Experience. Tonight on this Tuesday, we are, of course, going to be covering fantasy football, but we're going to be covering the whole AFC East. That is the Bills, the Dolphins, the Jets, and the New England Patriots. But before we get into everything, of course, we want to talk about who we're powered by, the Sports Lounge Media. Great group of people over there. If you have not went over and checked them out on YouTube or any other platform, please do so. Again, you're going to want to be a part of that journey once it takes off. And, of course, our sponsors, the Mogul Brand and Diamond Collection. We appreciate everything that they do as well. So, again, guys, tonight we are covering the AFC East as a whole in fantasy. Just really a fantasy breakdown. We did last week, we did the NFC East. Exactly really the same thing. We're going to ask a question. We're going to answer the question, and then we're going to give our outlook, on that said situation for the team. So we're going to get started right away with the Bills. Again, guys, this is going to be a lengthy one, probably about an hour and 15. I appreciate everybody that sticks around and does the lengthy episodes. So again, I'm just trying to give you guys the best information that we can. NFL season is coming up, guys. It's coming up rapidly. We are about a month away from, less than a month away. Before we actually start getting kicked up into football. So I had to think about that for a minute. So again, we're going to get started right on the Bills. The Bills really combined a top 3 passing game with one of the most efficient rushing attacks in the league. You throw in another top 12 scoring defense. It sure looked like Josh Allen, the lead group finally was going to have to make that hump, right? That postseason hump. Sadly, they did not. It was the same Achilles heel as it always been, as Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs sent him home in January for the 4th time in the last 5. I'm not even a Bills fan, and that hurt to type out. I do feel for the Bills fans. I'm sure they must not. They're not the fans of the Chiefs, right? And of course, last season's pain and misery doesn't change the fact that this once again has the looks of being one of the best rosters in the league. Okay, accordingly, today's goal is to answer, some fantasy-related questions around the Bills and whether or not they finally have enough juice to take down Andy Reid's evil empire when it matters. Okay, is Josh Allen the quarterback 1 in fantasy football? Right, last year he was quarterback 1. Sir, MVP of the football, right? Had a great season. Certainly had a good case for the honor. After all, Allen's career average of 22.2 fantasy points per game is the highest by any quarterback ever. Okay, that's his career average. That said, Lamar Jackson, I apologize about that. I was wrong. Lamar Jackson was the crown winner last year. Okay. In a large part to a spike in passing numbers during a year that Allen averaged, his fewest passing yards per game at 219. Now, that drop-off in counting numbers came with career best marks in QBR, EPA per dropback. So, other things are improving, but again, his passing yards per game did go down. The Bills' decision to really embrace the run did accordingly lead to, enhanced efficiency on the offense, I imagine, and through the air. You're strong in the run game, and, it opens up play action, opens up the deep ball. Josh Allen needs that. Allen still averaged a 22.3 fantasy points per game. He finished as quarterback 2, demonstrating that, he was still more than capable of supplying fantasy fireworks, despite averaging, again, the fewest passing yards per game. Okay? Still, this change in offensive philosophy under Joe Brady, led to Allen being awfully reliant on his legs in fantasy land. Okay? highest percentage of fantasy points to come from rushing among the top 20 quarterbacks in 2024. It was Jalen Hurts at 45%, Jaden Daniels at 35%, and Josh Allen at 33%. Okay? Luckily, Allen is a mutant as a ball carrier. He reminds me of a Big Ben running the ball, but obviously a lot faster than Big Ben used to be. Okay, combining that high-end speed and agility with a battering ram mindset. He's 6'5", he's 6'5", 237, guys. He's averaging at least 6 carries per game during, each and every last season of his career. The last 2 campaigns have produced a whopping 27 scores on the ground. Okay, now this is in thanks to a large part to Buffalo's willingness to, feature the tush push more than any offense outside of Philly, right? Overall, Allen's 7 rushing scores inside the 5-yard line were tied for the 8th highest mark in the league last year. He and Jalen Hurts, who had 11, were the only quarterbacks with more than 4 such scores in 2024. Okay? So what is Josh Allen's 2025 fantasy football outlook? What do we expect out of Josh Allen this year? The lack of any new high-end resources in the passing game, okay, with all due respect to Joshua Palmer, make it tough to guarantee a huge bounce back in terms of passing counting numbers in 2025. That said, the return of the OC Joe Brady and all 5 starters from PFF's reigning 5th ranked offensive line makes it reasonable to once again expect to be pretty good, guys. Okay, I think it would be okay to call it to finish inside the position's top 2 highest scoring quarterbacks. Even if his alien level ceiling might just be a bit out of reach and what this more conservative version of the Bills offense, I think it's still worthy enough to call him very, very high draftable. Okay. What will James Cook encore campaign look like? Okay. Cook had himself a hell of a season in 2024, working as the running back 11 in points per game on the back of 18 touchdowns. The 25-year-old looked like one of the best players on the field while racking up 134 total yards and 2 scores at Arrowhead in the AFC Championship. James Cook definitely wasn't the reason they lost. I think there's little doubt that Buffalo has themselves a damn good running back leading that backfield. That said, Cook actually wound up with 42 fewer touches in 2024 than he did in 2023, when he finished as the running back 19 in points per game in 2023. So he's improved off of just 42 less touches significantly. Cook's receiving fantasy points per game also fell off a cliff. They went from 6.6 to 4.4. So really, how did he produce more in fantasy land last season, right? Well, the answer is real simple. Good old-fashioned touchdowns, right? Regression? Luck? Look, I understand it's never easy to punch, the ball all over the goal line except against the wall. The will of 11 finely tuned athletic machines, right? But at the risk of being too big of a nerd, Cook's touchdown rate in 2024 feels awfully unsustainable. Okay. Cook converted just 2.3% of his touches into scores during the 2022-2023 season, which was 41st among 53 qualified running backs. But in 2024, did that improve? Yes, it did. Cook's 7.5 touchdown rate was easily first among 51 qualified backs. That mark is good for the 7th highest mark among any running back with 200 plus touches in a season since 2000. So again, Cook went over the limit, guys. He shot his shot. Do I see that repeating? It's hard to say. Again, Cook is really good at football. His average of 0.82 rushing yards, over expected carry, ranked 8th among all running backs, right behind Bucky Irvin and Jahmyr Gibbs last season. He's flashed the ability to kill defenses down the field as a receiver, even if drop touchdowns have become a bad habit over the years, because they have. There's little doubt that the undersized, running back has proven more than capable of leading a professional backfield. But man, Cook just become the 6th running back since 2000 to score at least 15 touchdowns on the ground with less than 210 carries. Okay? Those other running backs scored 2, 4, 7, 3, and 2 times the next season. They didn't even reach 8 touchdowns, guys. Cook leaping from 4 to 13 carries inside that 5-yard line certainly helped matters. And we shouldn't expect him to really be ignored around the goal line. But I think at a minimum, drafters should be careful about assuming 2025 will look more like running back 1 heights from a 2024 as opposed to a mid-tier running back 2 production from 2023, when the former stretch didn't really even come courtesy of a massive increase in volume. Okay, again, it was 42 less touches. This offense has seen more gelled out, more evenly fielded, right? It's not more so relying on James Cook. It's not so much more relying on Josh Allen. Joe Brady has actually spread that responsibility out, it seems. Okay, so is James Cook a fantasy football fade in 2025? Cook finished just as the running back 22 last year, okay, indicating his workload didn't exactly match up with the corresponding production. Throw in ongoing disgruntlement stemming from the lack of a contract extension, right? And I haven't exactly been lining up to draft the running back 14 in the early ADP, okay? I prefer more guaranteed high volume from guys like Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, even if the best case touchdown upside probably isn't quite as high. Additionally, I love Ray Davis. I love Ray Davis as a late round handcuff, okay? The Bills didn't add any meaningful competition to the backfield all offseason. We saw exactly what Davis is capable of when Cook missed time during his time of injury stretch there. Davis did go for 23 touches, 152 yards against the Jets. Now, it was the Jets, but again, what has been the Jets' strength the last couple of years? It has been their defense, okay? We have to admit that. Will anyone truly stand out as a must-start fantasy wide receiver here in Buffalo? Okay, you got Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Joshua Palmer, and Curtis Samuel. Okay, out of those 3 candidates, I'm going to leave Curtis Samuel off the board. Okay, so our 3 candidates, Khalil Shakir led the way with a solid 76 catches last year. Okay, just over 800 yards and only 4 touchdowns. Okay. Continuing to provide all the sorts of, the yards after catch goodness as the offense's really go-to underneath option. He was wide receiver 37 last year. Okay, but he did earn a 4-year contract extension in this last offseason, cementing him really as the team's slot saving of the present, right, and the future. So this role earned him a team high 100 targets in 15 games last season, and he's accordingly projected to again lead the team in a raw passing game opportunities in 2025. So I think Shakir has a solid option, right? Next guy, Keon Coleman, appeared to be coming on strong, right? With his rookie campaign, came in at a 4-catch, 125 yards, and a 5-catch, 70-yard, and a touchdown performances week 7 and week 8 in his rookie campaign. Okay, but a mid-season hand wrist injury sidelined the second-round pick for 4 weeks. Okay, he would only catch 10 total passes during his final 7 games upon returning. He just really wasn't an inclement part of the offense. Wasn't missed, maybe. That said, Coleman sure seemed to earn Allen's, trust as a jump ball specialist. And he also displayed some surprisingly fun after the catch ability on his way to joining some pretty damn good company. Okay, to lead the position in next gen stats yards after catch. The departures of Mac Hollins and Amari Cooper should solidify Coleman as a near every down player in 2025. He has a shot. Do I think he has a better shot than Shakir? Absolutely not. Okay, and then we'll get on to Joshua Palmer. Okay, Joshua Palmer recently took his talents to Buffalo in free agency thanks to a 3-year deal. The case for Palmer, well, is simple. He's a plus route runner capable of separating and winning versus man coverage. Something the Bills really haven't had since Stephon Diggs. Palmer's career average of 39.4 receiving yards per game, well, is a bit underwhelming, considering he had the luxury of playing with a good quarterback in Justin Herbert, right? But his skill set plus contract should cement him as a starter in the 3 wide receiver sets this season. Okay? After that, the Bills boast a lethal 2021 depth chart, headlined by the likes of Curtis Samuel, Elijah Moore, and I can't remember say his name, but Shenault. He was more of a gadget player for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, again, these guys in 2021 might have looked good, but we're in 2025, guys. While there are likely still some truthers out there for each, cheap guy, dollars in draft capital, according to Shakir, Coleman, and Palmer, will most likely make each fairly consistent full-time players in 2025. Okay, if you're a cheap at wide receiver, maybe the Bills are your best shot. Okay, which Bills wide receiver can we trust in fantasy? That's a big question right now. Okay, I think Shakir remains the best bet in full PPR formats and is plenty capable of returning to wide receiver 3 value at his wide receiver 4 price tag. Okay, I also don't mind Coleman or Palmer at their respective affordable price tags. What if a drop off from the defense or a natural progression leads to Allen's pass number getting more in line from what we saw the previous 3 years? Okay, Coleman in particular is someone who I've been made a habit of attacking in later rounds. He just turned 22 and could be a rich man's version of Gabe Davis when it's all said and done. Be that top guy. Take the top off. Okay. Next position, tight end. Could 2025 finally be the year that Dalton Kincaid makes that leap? Okay. The Bills seemingly used the 2023 first-round pick on Kincaid to get Allen his version of a Travis Kelce, right? While Kincaid's rookie campaign didn't exactly produce consistent fireworks, 73 catches, just below 700 yards, and only 2 touchdowns, was still a solid starting point. The team's lack of a true number 1 wide receiver in the aftermath of the Diggs trade, had many believing it was the second-year tight end's time to, lead the passing game. Or not. Mid-season shoulder and knee injuries really didn't help matters, but things weren't going all that great, even before health became an issue. The time he pointed at the Lions defenders and was cool and all, but listen, receiving stats in the playoffs was 3 catches, 1 catch, 2 catch. Didn't even have 50 yards, guys. Okay, and then was highlighted by a season-ending drop against the Chiefs. Okay, making it awfully difficult to be, overly high on the 2025 or the 25-year-old talent ahead of 2025. Now, Kincaid's underlying efficiency numbers weren't terrible. He actually demanded targets at an elite rate. But more of the same won't be enough to save the day in the future seasons, even if you can't fully displace, Dawson Knox from the starting lineup. Okay? To be fair, Kincaid's uncatchable target rate reflects the reality that it wasn't all his fault. Perhaps comeback season will be in the air in 2025, although it's more of a leap of faith to assume he'll completely displace Knox as the featured full-time tight end, right? Is Dalton Kincaid a late-round sleeper? Kincaid's high targets per route run and plus offensive environment make him tough to drop too far down the ranks. Okay. He's ranked between tight end 12 and tight end 15 from all the rankers at fantasylife.com. There's a fine enough price tag for best ballers in need of multiple players at the position. But I prefer the superior target ceiling of guys like Jake Ferguson and Evan Ingram at the cost when looking to simply secure one tight end for your redraft squad. Okay, what teams have produced the most consistent defenses in recent years? Well, you could certainly argue the Bills. After all, nobody has allowed fewer points per game than the Bills at 19.6 across the last 5 seasons, guys. There is some turnover to worry about. Von Miller, Rasul Douglas are both still sitting on the open market at the time of this writing. Okay? Still, the defensive line could arguably be improved after Buffalo threw dollars at Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, and Larry Ogunbowale. Okay? Probably butchered that last one, but it's all right. Bottom line is, if I were a gambling man, and I am, I would bet on the Bills to again work as one of the league's more productive defenses. Okay, they remain a quality defense special teams pick for those into that kind of thing. I'm not a big defensive guy. I like my individual players to draft, but that's your guys' kind of thing. The Bills are definitely a solid option. Okay, what is my Bills 2025 prediction and hot take? The Bills lead the NFL in points per game over the past 5 years, while simultaneously allowing the fewest points per game. Lack of deep postseason success aside, this has clearly been one of the very best teams in the league. It'd make a lot of sense if they finally make it over that gargantuan Mahomes-sized hump one of these days, right? But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this season will, in fact, be that day. I feel it. I really do. Okay? This has been the Achilles heel of Josh Allen for the last 5 seasons, guys. I think it's time. I think it's time we take that hope. Okay? My bold fantasy call this year is Keon Coleman catches double-digit touchdowns and returns a top 24 finish in Fantasyland. You heard it here first at the Marshall Experience. Next team we're going to talk about is the Miami Dolphins. All right, guys? So, really excited about this team. I'm really excited about Devon Achane, what we could see from Tua. The last season was supposed to be the year that Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins finally made it over the hump, right? Captured their first playoff victory since 2000. Yikes. After all, first 2 seasons with Tua Tagovailoa and company produced 9-8 and 11-6, okay, respectively. Now, this was fueled by the league's 6th-ranked scoring offense. Unfortunately, another early season concussion for Tua largely doomed the offense from the start. As winning 6 out of their final 9 games wasn't enough to snap the Bills' 5-year streak of the AFC East championship, right? Okay. Last season was anything but typical compared to what Miami has experienced under McDaniel. 22nd in points per game and 10th in points per game against. Okay. While there are some new faces around here, we've seen the Jalen Ramsey trade, the Jonnu Smith trade, Micah Fitzpatrick. Does he fix the defense? No. Come on, let's be honest about it. Micah Fitzpatrick is he may end up being in his prime, maybe a couple of years after, but again, it's a one-man show over there. Okay, it's not like we have Pittsburgh where he's surrounded by a good supporting cast. Is Tua a viable starting fantasy quarterback in 2025? We've seen Tua be both really good and really bad during his 5-year career, but 2024 was actually on the better side of things in terms of EPA per dropback. Okay, while Tua's raw yards per attempt, which was 7.2, reached a 3-year low, he completed an NFL high 72.9% of his passes and posted the lowest interception rate during his time with McDaniel, throwing a career best 52% success rate, fueled by plenty of, lower ADOT targets, Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith. But, Tua still largely had this offense humming. Just look at their ranks when he came back from week 18 to week 16. Okay, when he got back in the lineup. Okay, in that time frame, week 18 to week 16, they were 10th in points per game, 3rd in success rate, 5th in EPA per dropback. All those numbers on the offense improved, guys. Okay, the involved fantasy points per game. He was quarterback 14. Weren't quite what we saw in 2022, which was quarterback 10. But they were actually an improvement on 2023, which was quarterback 19. Okay? We might never see the Tua that, joined the true elites of the position in fantasy land due to his lack of rushing floor now, right? But just realize last year was pretty much in line with his previous 2 years of solid play. Okay, so what is the outlook for Tua in 2025? While McDaniel will need to develop a counterpunch to get this offense fully humming again, I'd argue last year's relative drop-off in production was more due to the supporting cast than I think Mr. Tua. Okay? Reminder that we are just 1 year removed from Tua leading the NFL in passing yards. Anything close to a return to form from his pair of speedy receivers could help him bring that sort of high-end weekly upside. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I don't find myself necessarily sprinting to the podium to draft Tua, specifically despite his affordable QB 22 ADP. But the presence of him, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence in that range makes me more comfortable deploying a first or last strategy at the position in drafts of most shapes and sizes, right? So if you do a late quarterback draft, Tua could possibly be a target. Does Miami have 2 running backs? Fantasy managers should be very interested in. Okay. Well, Devin Achane, as all Achane has done is in his first 2 seasons is rack up almost 2,500 total yards and 23 trips to the end zone. While his rookie campaign was more explosive and featured an NFL record 7.8 yards per carry, last season instead saw a bit of a more reliance on volume, particularly with an early season high ankle sprain, that kind of hobbled him up there for a couple weeks. Okay, on that latter note, just look at Achane's rushing performances in week 1 through 5 compared to after the team's week 6 bye. Okay, weeks 1 through 5, he only had 3.3. Come back 7 through 18 had 4.9. He went from 45th ranked to 9th. Okay, Getting Tua back under center also helped these matters, right? Particularly in the passing game, where Achan made a huge leap forward. Overall, whopping 58% of Achan's fantasy production came through the passing game, which was easily the highest mark of any top 20 running back last season. Note that this production was unique relative to other players at the position, as the rising 30-year talent racked up 34 receptions when lined up from the slot or out wide. Now, this was 15 more than second place Alvin Kamara at 19. Ultimately, only Jahmyr Gibbs, which is 65%, finished as the top 12 PPR performer in a higher percentage of games than Achan last year among all running backs. There's less depth chart competition to worry about now than ever that Mostert's gone. Don't be surprised if the running back 6 in PPR points per game during the past 2 seasons again puts forward what kids might call an elite fantasy campaign. Okay, well, then there's Jalen Wright, who landed on my list of underrated veteran winners. While Wright didn't exactly boom in his rookie year, he deserves credit for finishing first among Dolphin running backs in yards after contact. Okay? He also was first in tackles avoided per carry at 23% and an explosive run rate at 10%. Yes, this still didn't result in much work or fantasy fireworks in 2024, I may add. But also, yes, the Dolphins largely refrained from adding any sort of meaningful competition this entire offseason. Okay, now consider these things. They released Raheem Mostert. He went to the Raiders. Okay, they did not re-sign current free agent Jeff Wilson. The only free agent addition was career backup Alexander Mattison on a tiny 1-year, $2 million deal. Okay. And then they waited until the 6th round to select Ollie Gordon. Now, Gordon is more interesting than your usual day 3 pick, I will admit, due to his plus size at 6'1", 226. I think that, you ignore his 2024 season. You look at his 2023 season, which was massively huge. 2,000 yards and total yards and 22 touchdowns at Oklahoma State. Okay? But the Dolphins have added right to this entire offseason is Alexander Mattison and a 6th-round rookie. Guys, that's a W. That's a W. So what is Devon Achan's fantasy football outlook for 2025? Achan is my overall running back 4. Okay, run, do not walk. To pick him in the 2nd round in fantasy drafts of most shapes and sizes this offseason. Meanwhile, Wright is currently going in this round 16 of most dynasty drafts, and I love this price tag for someone with an outside chance for just standalone flex value. And, well, sky-high handcuff value should Achan ever miss any action, right? Can Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle regain that high-end fantasy value? Okay? It was almost shocking how much the Dolphins' passing game strayed away from its wide receivers last year. But can you really blame them? Now, these are the passer ratings when targeted in 2024. Listen to this. Jonnu Smith, 121.2. Devon Achan, 119.2. Then we go to Tyreek Hill at 97.1 and Jalen Waddle at a whopping 90.6. Okay? Jonnu Smith was 7th all among tight ends and 2nd among all running backs for Achan, as Hill and Waddle finished almost outside the top 50 in wide receivers. Okay? Tyreek and Waddle were really mediocre in yards per route run, 38 and 53rd, respectively. Targets per route run wasn't even better. Okay. The former wide receiver did battle a wrist injury throughout the season, right? But it's tough to fully blame that on his performance, considering Hill was only charged with 3 drops all year. The latter talent was seemingly healthy for most of the year before missing for weeks 16 and 17 with a knee injury. Unlike with Achan, we also didn't exactly see either wide receiver get back to balling once Tua was under center. Tyreek was the wide receiver 24 with 14.6 points per game in weeks 8 through 16, while Waddle was the wide receiver 39 in that stretch before suffering his aforementioned knee injury. Okay. While this offseason has been a bit of a crazy one for Hill, given off his off-field issues, right? Interesting social media posts, whatever it is. The team's relative lack of investment in new wide receivers, with the exception of touchdown scoring extraordinaire Nick Westbrook and Kanye, almost certainly locks up the Dolphins duo into more big-time workloads. Now, this is reflected into the Fantasy Life projections, which have Hill 11th among wide receiver in targets and Waddle 24th. Okay, now these both cleared their 2024 totals, so we'll see. Hill carries the 4th highest PPR projection among all wide receivers. Waddle is 21st. So it's tough to explain why 2024 was so rough for both, but then again, maybe we're just overreacting to a one-year sample when the previous 2 seasons, were pretty damn good for both. Affordable early ADP for Hill, which is wide receiver 15, and Waddle wide receiver 32. Make sure it seems like this is a good chance to buy both players closer to their floor than their ceiling. Okay? So what is the outlook for both wide receivers in 2025? It's fair to be wary of Hill, considering the offseason and the reality that the 31-year-old veteran typically didn't thrive at the position. But then again, we are literally just one season removed from him leading the league in receiving yards at almost 1,800 and 13 touchdowns. A similar sentiment is true for Waddle, who remains as very good company among wide receivers to record 1,000 yards in the first 3 years of his career. Ultimately, I'm drinking the bounce back Kool-Aid and moved both up in my rankings upon writing this preview. I get not pulling the trigger on them every draft. I get that. But we're still looking at 2 target hog wide receivers with a tantalizing history of putting up big-time fantasy numbers. Even if last season didn't exactly feature either player putting up their best foot forward, right? Now, we can sit here and we can talk about Jonnu Smith, right? We had written this before, so we're going to go ahead and add in Jonnu Smith for here. But we're going to add in a little bit of a twist, right? We're going to add in what he does for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, what do we grade this trade as? And I think it does. I think it hurts the Miami Dolphins, okay? As we had talked about, he had the top passer rating as a target in Miami's offense last year, and I think you took away a weapon for Tua. Okay, now, what did they replace that with? Now, they did replace that with Darren Waller. But what do we think we're going to get, guys? I mean, do you guys think we're going to get a 2020 Darren Waller and, like, in his prime, top of the shape of his career, he's going to come out and give you 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns? Come on, man. Like, the guy's been in a rapping career the whole last year. I mean, the guy got signed by the Dolphins, and he had to write a whole brand new song about how he got signed by the Dolphins. Come on, let's be real here, man. Like, if we think that Darren Waller is going to be on any level of what Jonnu Smith was last year, for the Miami Dolphins. I just don't see it, guys. I really don't. Okay? How unique is this Dolphins offense when it comes to pre-snap motion and play action? I read up on this. This is very interesting. McDaniel has largely made a habit of pushing all the easy schematic buttons during his 3-year run as the Dolphins head coach. Miami has ranked inside the league's top 5 offenses in both pre-snap motion and play action rate each and every season since 2022. Okay? Of course, things didn't go smoothly without Tua under center last year. Actually, they went pretty horribly. But hey, maybe Zach Wilson can provide a higher floor than former Pro Bowl quarterback Tyler Huntley did last season if disaster strikes again and Tua goes down. So, what is the bold prediction for the Miami Dolphins in 2025? The Dolphins at plus 125 odds on their over 8.5 win total reflects the reality, well, that Vegas isn't exactly sold on a bounce-back campaign, right? The team did make a few big-dollar additions to the offensive line, James Daniels and secondary Javon Holland, right? But I'm hesitant to call either move a true difference-making transaction at this point. Ultimately, it's my first under, guys. Ultimately, I'm going to take the under. 8 wins for a team that at a bit of a crossroads ahead of 2024, right? Okay, everyone is a year older. And the internal chemistry really doesn't seem to pass the sniff test from the outside. That said, my bold fantasy prediction is that Achan finishing in the running back could finish as the running back one, thanks to the potential for his typically awesome rushing efficiency. Okay? I think that his borderline erotic receiving ability, combine that, and I think you are looking at a Marshall Faulk-esque monster campaign. I think now that Mostert is gone, he is the guy. He has the workload. I think that Achan may be the guy this year to draft, guys. Maybe. Appreciate everybody tuning in the chat. We got Sarai. We got Sports with Sunshine. And down south, I got to be careful with how much I'm putting out here. Because, guys, we are doing a Sports Lounge Media league. And so I got to be careful. I got to be careful how much I'm giving out. But, again, I'm worried about my fans. I'm worried about the content. So we're just going to push it out anyway. But, again, remember, a magician never reveals his true secrets. Next team we're going to talk about is the New York Jets. The New York Jets, right? The Jets were supposed to finally put everything together in 2024 with a healthy Aaron Rodgers alongside a defense that, well, many considered one of the better units in the NFL. Okay? Instead, old man Rodgers and that offense were incredibly mediocre. Supposed defensive mastermind head coach Robert Saleh was fired early in October, and New York finished with a sub-500 season for an NFL high 9th consecutive year. Okay, this was anyone's idea of a bad football team. Okay, 24th in points per game. Points per game against was 20th. Now, Jets owner Woody Johnson went ahead and infiltrated the Lions coaching staff in an attempt to turn the ship really around. It remains to be seen just how qualified and ready to go a new head coach in Aaron Glenn is. New offensive coordinator Tanner Eggstrand. I'm probably going to butcher that. Well, but hey, it can't get much more worse, right? We have to look at that. It can't get much more worse. This brings us to today's goal. Answer some key fantasy-related questions about the Jets, right? Okay. Let's get into it. Justin Fields. Is Justin Fields the late-round quarterback target this year? Okay. Over the past 3 seasons, there's actually been minimal turnover atop the fantasy points per dropback leaderboard. In fact, 4 quarterbacks have made the metrics top 5 in 3 consecutive seasons. Okay? Josh Allen, duh. Lamar Jackson, obviously. Jalen Hurts, makes sense. Justin freaking Fields. Guys, when this man is on the field, he's a fantasy cheat code. Now, this goodness from 2024 obviously only came across 6 starts. But for all the grief of that for Fields catching as a passer, we probably don't give him enough love for what he's capable of doing on the ground. Okay? After all, Fields did join Jackson and Jaden Daniels as the only quarterbacks in NFL history to average at least 50 rushing yards per game during their career. Now, this dual threat element has really helped Fields consistently rack up rather great numbers in fantasy land, even if his progression as a real-life passer hasn't exactly been awesome, right? This is Fields' fantasy points per game since 2022. 2022, he was QB5 at 19.7 points per game. The next year, he was quarterback 11 at 17.7 points per game. And then this last year, he moved back up to quarterback 8 at 18.9, okay? It remains to be seen if Fields will turn into, well, the first overly successful Jets quarterback since, I don't know, Chad Pennington. Are we calling that? Mark Sanchez? Are we doing that? Maybe Joe Namath? Right? Yikes. It really has been rough for the Jets. But I wouldn't count on Fields necessarily being confused with some of the league's more elite pure passers anytime soon. Okay? Have you seen this wide receiver room outside of Garrett Wilson? It's not pretty. Okay? Just realize Fields putting up quality numbers in fantasy lands would be par for the course considering how dominant high volume dual threat quarterbacks have been over the last 3 years. Fantasy, I was reading an article in the Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, and I can't say that word, analytics. Dwayne McFarland. Okay, I love the guy, love his writing. He currently has Fields projected for 132 carries this season. Now, barring a complete faceplant collapse, that leads to a Tyrod Taylor maybe starting job because Fields can't get it done or an injury happens. It sure looks like Fields will have a tough time busting in fantasy football, okay? So what is our fantasy football outlook for Justin Fields in 2025? I have Fields at quarterback 12. And honestly, that might feel like a little too low. He's one of my most drafted players at the position in early best ball drafts. It might not be rocket science, but rushing quarterbacks continue to be one of the closest things our glorious pastime known as fantasy football is to a cheat code, okay? Running quarterbacks is where it's at. I can't make that simple enough. Now, is Breece Hall running back 1 season over? The Jets' featured running back doesn't turn 24 until the end of May, which has already happened, and has already managed to put forward some pretty damn good fantasy campaigns. Running back 8 in 2022, running back 6 in 2023. Last year had an off year, but it was running back 17. Of course, the latter season wasn't bad, but as they say, comparison is the theft of joy, right? And as Hall's production, accordingly, wasn't nearly what fantasy managers had in mind when they used a first-round pick on Breece Hall to acquire his services. So what happened to Hall in 2024? Well, and again, I've been a big thing on this. I'm a big thing that Aaron Rodgers changed the fantasy outlook for Breece Hall. But racking up a position-high 15 combined fumbles and drops certainly didn't help matters. Nor did career low marks and tackles avoided per carry. Okay, it was not a great season from Breece Hall. It just wasn't. Yet, it's also hard to ignore just how rough of an offensive environment Hall has been forced to operate in, right? His 2022 ACL and meniscus tears were one thing. But this has also been anyone's idea of a brutal setup when it comes to getting reasonable rushing lanes, right? The Jets running back yards per contact, yards before contact per carry, okay? So how many yards is Breece Hall getting before he is touched? 2022 is 1.09. They were ranked 30th. 2023, that went down to 1.07, ranked 23rd. 2024 was 1.08 at 26. Guys, that's been consistent. I don't see that changing. The Jets have made no real, true, scary additions on the offensive line. Okay? Now, obviously, Tyrone, they got to replace Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, but they're actually in a pretty great position to do so. I think that I think there's still a couple guys out there that are serviceable. Okay, I think they had a chance at the draft. Historically, dual threat quarterbacks like Fields have done a great job evaluating this very metric, seemingly thanks to the gravity in a read option game. Okay, of course, as much as athletic quarterbacks might raise the floor of their team's run game efficiency, but they also tend to factor into the rushing equations near the goal line. They usually scramble more than they check down, right? Ultimately, even an uptick in yards per carry might not be enough to make up for a reduced role if Aaron Glenn if head coach Aaron Glenn can be taken at his word. Okay, Fantasy Life projections still have Hall earning a solid 280 combined carries and targets, which is the eighth highest mark in the league. Now, it's fair to say Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis don't exactly profile as the steepest competition in the world. And the Jets did next to nothing to address the position in free agency or the draft, right? Can Breece Hall be a fantasy draft bargain? The tight end upside and target ceiling that typically go hand in hand with elite fantasy running backs don't seem to be overly on the table for Hall. But that seemed to be more than reflected in his early running back 13 ADP. While I still prefer cheaper backs like Joe Mixon, maybe even a RJ Harvey at cost, thanks to the potential for similar volume and, likely far better overall offenses. Round 4, Hall is a nice piece for rosters that implement wide receiver heavy starts and want a discount bell cow, right? Does that make sense? So you go wide receiver heavy, then you're like, I got to get a running back, but I don't want to wait till round 8 or 9. Breece Hall would be a solid mid-round pick there. I'm not overly interested in either Allen or Davis as late-round draft just due to the reality that we have no idea if either would assume anything close to a workhorse role should Hall miss time with an injury, right? If Hall goes down, I think that turns into a split backfield. This isn't exactly the sort of scoring offense that we should be dying to get exposure in to have on your fantasy team, guys. It's just not. Do the Jets have any viable wide receiver behind Garrett Wilson? Wilson is just one of 10 players in the Super Bowl era to gain at least 1,000 yards receiving in each of his first 3 seasons of his career. Note that he has reached the mark in each season before getting to the luxury of a 17th game. So this is good company. Of course, the results in fantasy land haven't exactly been phenomenal. Wilson has finished as the wide receiver 30, 32, and most recently wide receiver 20 in points per game. Now, this is a mixture of incompetent quarterback play and the presence of Davante Adams have prevented the 24-year-old talent from really putting forward this sort of elite season-long campaign the Jets envisioned when they selected him with the 10th overall pick, right? So why should 2025 be any different with Fields now under center? Well, for one thing, the rest of this wide receiver room is, just really sad. Like, I honestly get upset looking at this depth chart. Age 30 is Josh Reynolds. He's fresh off of catching 13 passes in 9 games last year. The 29-year-old Allen Lazard was Aaron Rodgers' pick and just led the league in drop rate and, sent perhaps the saddest Wolf of Wall Street "I'm not leaving" tweet of all time. Nobody cared, Allen. Nobody cared, right? Aaron Rodgers left. He's like, "I'm not leaving." Nobody even blinked an eye, bro. Accordingly, Wilson is one of just 8 wide receivers the Fantasy Life projects to clear 140 targets this season. Now, he joins that into being Jahmyr Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas seems a little tough for me considering Travis Hunter. But Amon-Ra, Puka, Wilson, and Neighbors. Now, if you notice the list, you are noticing purified wide receiver ones. These are the guys that are going to get the majority of the targets. They are classifying Wilson as one of those this year. Okay, so what is his worth? Is he worth a high draft pick in 2025? Unfortunately, Wilson isn't getting much of a discount in fantasy streets. His current wide receiver 13 ADP is only going around later than where he was at last year. While I'm actually the second highest ranker that I've seen on Wilson, which is mine's wide receiver 15, that's a steep price to pay for any pass catcher who could be operating inside the league's least productive pass game. Okay, I'm okay targeting Wilson in the later stages of round 3, ideally round 4. But heck, even DJ Moore's breakout 2023 campaign with Fields under center produced only a wide receiver 9 finish. Okay, we aren't getting too big of a delta between ADP and that hopeful ceiling, guys. So as for every other player in this, sad excuse for a wide receiver room, I think I'm out. You know what I mean? Garrett Wilson's the only draftable guy there. What are reasonable 2025 rookie year expectations for Mason Taylor? The Jets' second round pick just turned 21 on May 8th. Yet sure looks like the front runner for immediate starting duties, right? Excuse me. Now, not every starting tight end is created equal around the NFL. It wouldn't be surprising to see Jeremy Ruckert or Stone Smart, some of the other guys that they have, also carve out roles. Again, Jeremy Ruckert's been there a few years, and Stone Smart, I think, was with the Chargers last year. So these are guys that either haven't really seen a lot of field or just got there. Okay. I think the LSU product should at least be considered a solid favorite. Okay. Similar to what, the Wilson, DJ Moore kind of deal is, Fields doesn't have a brief history. He does have a brief history of enabling a fantasy-friendly tight end. Okay, when he was with the Bears, Cole Kmet reached tight end 9 heights in PPR points per game in 2023. Of course, that was year 4 for the Bears tight end, but as players at the position have historically had a rough time getting going in year one, despite some recent booms from guys like Brock Bowers and Laporta. I don't think that Mason Taylor has a Brock Bowers or a Laporta year, but I think it is going to be serviceable. So is Mason Taylor worth a late round draft pick in redraft? I think Taylor is a solid late round dart in best ball land for rosters needing an extra player at the position. Okay, but his redraft value seems awfully thin to be overflowing with excess pass game production, right? We can talk about a waiver wire pickup. We can talk about that after week 1 or week 2, and we see the production. Okay, but more likely a year 1 scenario seems as the 1A in low production, right? All that said, Taylor does profile as a quality mid-round draft pick in Dynasty land. Okay, I like him in Dynasty. 21, just turned 21 years old, guys. Particularly in tight end premium formats where, well, you could either get 2 tight ends or you get an extra point for a catch. Those premium formats for tight ends could really bode well for Mason Taylor. Now, what defense has fielded the best secondary in recent years? Surprise. It's the Jets. Now, the latter stat reflects the reality that it's a team effort between the pass rush and the coverage to produce great pass defense stats like the ones they have posted. But one look at the production allowed is specifically wide receivers gives a pretty good idea as to what position group is especially thriving. Of course, 2022 is consistently the year the Jets drafted Sauce Gardner with the 4th overall pick. That's when their defense really took that next step. Now, while interceptions matter when discussing the very best corners in the game, Gardner just has 3 in 48 career games. But Gardner has been the linchpin behind objectively one of the best pass defenses in the league during the last 3 seasons, and is seemingly awfully likely to become a very rich man in the near future. So what is our prediction for the New York Jets in 2025? Well, you probably don't expect much out of the Jets in real life ahead next season. And get this, neither does Vegas. Overall, they joined the Saints, Browns, Titans, and Giants as the only teams with measly 5.5 win-tide totals. Sadly, I'm going to go under on this one, guys. The elite Bills, rising Patriots, and, well, the still competitive Dolphins provide little relief in the AFC East. And there's just too much potential for this offense to sputter in a major way. Okay, that said, my bold fantasy prediction for the year is that Justin Fields will produce his 2nd career top 5 finish thanks to that sweet rushing upside. Again, you heard it here first at the Marshall Experience. Top 5 finish for Justin Fields for the 2nd time in his career. Last team we're going to talk about tonight is the New England Patriots. Okay, the 2024 Patriots were fully expected, well, to be a sad excuse for a professional football team. That's pretty much what happened. Only week 18, Joe Milton heroics against the Bills' backups prevented his 4-13 squad from securing the number 1 overall pick. Okay, the defense flashed a little bit, but this was still, and by a large margin, a bad football team. 30th in points per game. That's 17. Okay, and then points per game against, they almost allowed 25 per game and were ranked 22nd. But yet there were suddenly, there's glimmers of hope ahead of next season thanks to new head coach Mike Vrabel, obviously rising star Drake May, throwing an offensive line overhaul, and the additions of playmakers like Stephon Diggs and Trayvon Henderson. If you squint hard enough, you can see the Patriots messing around and contending for a wild card spot. Accordingly, again, today's goal, what are we doing? We're answering fantasy questions about the New England Patriots. Is Drake May a late round quarterback target? There was a weird sentiment with May last season, revolving around the idea that the Patriots should refrain from playing him at all costs due to this being such a bad offensive environment, right? Everybody was like, no, don't bring in May, just let him sit. There's no reason to risk injury, right? On the one hand, yeah, nobody had a worse supporting cast rating in 2025. And clearly New England still didn't resemble a contender upon inserting, number 3 overall pick into the starting lineup. On the other hand, May sure looked like a lot like the team's long-term answer under center despite the lack of winning football. Okay, 3 appearances with under 31% of the offense snaps per game numbers a bit. But accounting for this gave the rookie stellar averages of 223 passing yards per game and 36 rushing yards per game. He does have a little bit of legs, guys. Giving May the benefit of the doubt, here are the only other quarterbacks to clear those 220 passing yards and 35 rushing yards per game. Okay? Great company, guys. Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Michael Vick, Dante Culpepper, Randall Cunningham, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Robert Griffin III, Donovan McNabb, Steve Young, and Drake May. Great company. Now, note that Jaden Daniels also would have qualified if you remove his 2 sub 50% snap games from last season. Either way, again, pretty damn good company. Of course, the real difference maker in fantasy land among this group is the rushing prowess at hand. Something that May provided to be awfully good at as a rookie and during his time in North Carolina. Okay, overall, nobody averaged more yards per carry than May last season. 7.8. As a rookie, racked up more rushing yards on scrambles than last season, as the rookie racked up more rushing yards on scrambles than anyone other than Daniels. So he was second. Okay? Now, that's right. You read that right. I just said what I said. May was technically more lethal than Lamar freaking Jackson when scrambling. Okay? High-end volume. Rushing quarterbacks seldom bust in fantasy land, and this alone is enough for May to be a target in the later rounds of drafts. Although it would be nice to see an improvement in the passing department. Now, of course, Demario Douglas and Keyshawn Boutte were probably the league's worst 1-2 punch at wide receiver last season. Okay? They were PFF's reigning 32nd ranked offensive line. Also, obviously, didn't help matters. Here's to hoping Josh McDaniels, the return, can also pull a few rabbits out of his hat and make life easier for May. I'm particularly excited to see some of the design quarterback run concepts. I think that I'm excited about Trayvon Henderson helping him out. Stephon Diggs is obviously a big one, but we'll get into these guys. Drake May, what is the fantasy outlook for 2025? May is the cheapest quarterback in the fantasy football who we can reasonably expect to run a lot and start 17 games with good health. Sorry, Anthony Richardson. I just don't trust anymore. Now, while I don't blame folks for leaving May behind fellow nimble signal callers like Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, or Trevor Lawrence, I have him at the top of that tier. And either way, he's a great example of the sort of late-round quarterback to target. And a good reason why it might not be worth reaching on that second tier of passers this season due to relatively a stable tier of passers. How much superior upside does Kyler Murray really have over Drake May? You know what I mean? And that's quarterback 8 to quarterback 16, according to Fantasy Life. Now, note that from quarterback 8 to quarterback 16, they are only separated by less than 1 fantasy point. Okay, so that's a lot of consistency right there, that big gap. Will Trayvon Henderson lose carries to Ramondre Stevenson? Okay, the explosive Ohio State running back who was selected this last April presumably leads this Patriots backfield. Okay, now this is on top of the Patriots giving Stevenson a 4-year extension last June. Now, for a reason. Now, Vrabel and McDaniels weren't in charge then when that was agreed to. But then again, the latter OC was running the show. McDaniels was running the show in 2021 when Stevenson averaged 12.6 carries and targets per game while working alongside, I think it was Damian Harris and Brandon Bolden. Okay, not great competition, but again, Damian Harris was a gadget guy. Okay, it really is McDaniel's pass running back usage that makes me hesitant to assume Henderson will completely take over this backfield. We certainly have seen the longtime Patriots OC, now the ex-Raiders head coach, lean on one single back, Josh Jacobs. Okay, Josh Jacobs led the NFL with nearly 400 touches in 2022 under McDaniels. But I'm also old enough to remember the annual horror of attempting to figure out which Patriots running back would emerge as the best fantasy option through the 2010s. James White, we had Rex Burkhead. We had all these. We have always had a running back problem when it comes to fantasy in the Patriots running back room. Okay. Now, Stevenson is a capable receiving back, but this is really Henderson's calling card. Okay. Final note is Antonio Gibson probably just won't be a part of this committee. Might not even be a lock to make the roster, I'm going to be honest. But just realize his advanced metrics were borderline erotic last season. And there were more than a few baller plays on film, from Antonio Gibson. Now, there are a dozen of us who still believe in him. Maybe trade to the Cowboys. I could see that. There's some fantasy managers that still believe in Antonio Gibson. Okay. How will touches be broken up in the Patriots backfield? Henderson's profiles as the backfield's explosive pass game option, right? And accordingly should be the higher ranked back in PPR formats due to the receiving ability. That said, this still doesn't exactly profile as an offense expected to function as a top 10 scoring unit. So I have a tough time getting the rookie inside the position's top 24 players. Meanwhile, Stevenson is in a similar boat as Najee Harris. Unlikely to see the sort of 3-down role that would lead to running back 2 production. But double-digit weekly touches are likely still on the table. Okay, there's also some nice contingent upside here if Henderson happens to miss a game in any action, right? Stevenson is an underrated, solid 0 running back target. We've talked about those. Remember the 0 running back target draft strategies. Okay. Next is the wide receiver room. Is Stephon Diggs healthy enough to be the Patriots wide receiver 1? Now, Diggs has been posting some promising training footage coming off his unfortunate late October ACL tear. Dr. Jeff Mueller is the one that did his ACL. He believes that there's a decent chance he'll be fine throughout the season, given his current level of training. And joked that all the players who were ahead of schedule, Diggs actually might finally be the one that is actually ahead of schedule. Therefore, it seems to be a reasonable chance that Diggs is game ready by the summer, let alone week 1. Now, additionally, the Patriots must feel good. Well, it must feel at least pretty good about Diggs' chances of contributing early in 2025, considering they signed to pay him $63 million over the next 3 years. Now, they can get out of the deal without too much pain as early as 2026. Just realize that 21 per year is on par for what guys like Devontae Adams and Chris Godwin got this past offseason. Okay. Diggs ripped off 4 consecutive top 10 PPR seasons during his time in Buffalo before working as the wide receiver 17 during the first 8 weeks of last season with the Texans. Okay. So when he was there, he was projected to be possibly a top 15 wide receiver last year. There really isn't anyone else to get overly excited about in this wide receiver room. I know Ken's gonna give me some flack on that one. Pop Douglas, I know, but guess what? Fantasy value wise, it's got to be seen. I see these guys as waiver wire pickups, not somebody I would draft. Okay. Especially considering this uncertainty surrounding if anyone else were to manage to hold down a true full-time role, right? Now, if Diggs were to go down, guys, we go back to the same wide receiver room that was bottom of the league last year. Okay? Kyle Williams, however, I do like that. I do like Kyle Williams. Speedy, field stretching, third-round pick. Earned really mad reviews for Fantasy Life. But, hey, the opportunity is sure there to be a top target. Mac Hollins, okay, noted hater of soup and shoes. Profiles as the exact sort of big-bodied blocker that Mike Vrabel probably loves. I think he's going to be more of a blocker than he is anything else, okay? Mario Douglas. Pint-sized slot, right, with some enticing short area movement skills, but unlikely to be in those 2 wide receiver sets. I think that is going to be Kyle Williams and Stephon Diggs. Now, Keyshawn Bulte made a handful of big plays downfield inside this wide receiver room last year. He is from LSU. You know, it is what it is. Dark horse contender, I think for me, would be Kendrick Bourne, who just signed a 3-year deal last March. Jalen Polk, his average of 2.6 yards per target is the 3rd worst mark in NFL history among all wide receivers to earn at least 25 targets in a single season. So that's not really jumping off the page at me. And Javon Baker, guys, caught 1 pass last season. So let's not bring up that name either. Okay. Can we trust any Patriots wide receiver in fantasy? Well, we have really no evidence of Diggs working as anything other than a high-end fantasy wide receiver, right? And yet early ADP has him going outside of the top 40 options at the position. Personally, it feels like the age, 32 in November, and injury concern is more than baked into that price, okay? The man hasn't finished worse than wide receiver 25 in points per game in 10 years, guys. 10 years. Maybe I'll regret this, but Diggs is one of the most drafted wide receivers of the offseason. 49ers and Packers wide receiver in the similar ADP range simply just don't have the same likelihood of working as their pass game's clear-cut number 1 option, right? Meanwhile, Williams is someone I've been happy to dabble with in the later portions, I really do like Kyle Williams and think that he has the possibility of being Drake May's favorite target. Okay, so does the fantasy football world not give Hunter Henry enough respect? Scholars debate to this day exactly how good Hunter Henry is. Early career injuries in the presence of an old man, Antonio Gates, right, certainly didn't help matters, but we are talking about someone who has never gained even 700 receiving yards in 9 seasons. Now, don't get it twisted. The man isn't terrible. But are we really still chasing those Charger highs in the year 2025? I can't do it. The man just led the Patriots in targets at 97 last season. And all it produced was a top 16 finish, a tight end 16 finish. There were 6 top 10 finishes mixed in there last year, but Jiminy Christmas, man. He would have finished wide receiver 54. I mean, I'm just anyone else has to be offended by this. So we're going to keep it short and sweet. Is Hunter Henry worth a late round draft pick? Okay, Austin Hooper quietly snaked away 59 targets last year and earned 60 while working as Mike Vrabel's lead back in 2022. Tight end. Okay? Henry's starting job is not going anywhere. But just realize that something even close to a committee would be worrisome inside an improved passing game. I'm proud to be the lowest of the fantasy really rankers I've seen at tight end 23. I vastly prefer guys like Mike Gesicki, Cade Otton, and yes, even Kyle Pitts ahead of him in late round drafts. Excuse me. Do the Patriots have a budding star on the defense? Okay, guys, we're going to talk about the defense and then the prediction, and then we're going to get out of here. Do the Patriots have a budding star on defense? The rising third-year corner certainly had himself one hell of a 2024, surrendering only 499 total yards and 2 trips to the end zone. Okay, now among 81 corners who were targeted at least 50 times last season, Gonzalez posted top 10 marks in passer rating allowed and catch rate on targets into his coverage. Okay, now he's obviously going with the number 1 wide receivers, guys. Okay, I think I love me some Christian Gonzalez. And in those IDP leagues, Christian Gonzalez is the man to have. All right, so as a whole team, what is our Patriots prediction and hot take for 2025? Vegas is buying into the idea that the Patriots will be a better football team in 2025. Okay, their 7.5 win total has a solid 155 under, lean to the over, and matches the Seahawks, Falcons, Cowboys, Jags, and Colts. I get it. Not the world's greatest company, but at least there are 7 teams with worse outlooks. Excuse me. And you know what? I'm in. I'm all in. Thanks to the belief in May, Vrabel, and a retooled defense and a retooled offensive line, give me the over on a 7.5 win. And my bold fantasy prediction is that a healthy Stephon Diggs clears 1,000 yards and finishes as a top 24 wide receiver in points per game. Guys, that's going to be it for tonight. That is the AFC East in its entirety of fantasy breakdown. We appreciate every one of you tuning in, sticking around. It was a hell of an episode. There was a lengthy one. On Thursday, we will be back with our next division. Our next division is going to be, boom, the NFC North. So if you are a fan of the NFC North and you want to hear your team, if you want to hear what the fantasy implications are surrounding your team, come check us out Thursday at 8 o'clock. Again, I appreciate everybody tuning in. We appreciate everybody over the Sports Lounge Media. And you guys have a good work week. We will see you Thursday night. Thank you.